Good evening, dear listener. Find a cozy spot, perhaps settle under a soft blanket. Take a gentle sip of tea and rest your head against your pillow. Take a deep, calming breath, letting the world's noise fade into the background. Tonight, I invite you to relax into this quiet space where stories drift like wisps of fog and time itself seems to slow just enough to let us wander. Now imagine a scene not quite like the one you know, something curious and slightly surreal. Picture an ancient arena, but instead of roaring crowds and shining armor, it's filled with the faint hum of modern life. Somewhere in the shadows, a figure steps forward, not dressed in the usual gear of today's gym or the armor of old, but something in between, an unexpected blend of history and muscle, strength and sweat. This isn't just any story, it's a whisper of what could be, a strange, amusing collision of worlds. Think of a hero from centuries past suddenly trying to conquer a new kind of challenge, one that involves ropes, boxes, and that peculiar obsession called CrossFit. It's a universe where the past and present collide like two trains on a narrow track, leaving behind a trail of curious sparks. As the night deepens and the shadows stretch longer, your mind will drift closer to the edge of sleep. And soon you'll find yourself waking not in your familiar surroundings, but in a place where the air is thick with anticipation, and the air itself seems to hum with stories waiting to be told. A place where our brave gladiator, in his quest for glory, embarks on a journey far stranger than any arena's roar. The ground beneath you feels rough, cold, uneven stones pressed against your back, gritty and unforgiving, as if the earth itself is trying to remind you that comfort is a distant memory. A faint scent of smoke lingers in the air, mingled with the sharp tang of sweat and something else, burned herbs maybe, or the faint aroma of dried grapes that once clung to ancient barrels. Your nose crinkles involuntarily. The air is thick with odors that tell stories of daily toil, of fires burning through the night, and of lives that refuse to slow down. Your skin prickles with the coarse roughness of your clothing, perhaps a rough tunic, woven from thick wool, itchy and stiff from days of wear, and a heavy leather belt that feels like it's been molded to someone else's waist. Your fingers brush against something rigid, perhaps a fragment of pottery or a worn piece of armor, cool to the touch and slightly greasy. You try to shift, but the bed or mat underneath is nothing more than a patchwork of woven reeds, flattened and lumpy, cradling you with gentle yet persistent discomfort. The environment around you is alive with sound, distant clangs of metal on metal, the rhythmic pounding of hammers at a faraway forge, the murmur of voices, some loud and boisterous, others hushed and urgent. Somewhere nearby, a bell rings softly, marking the passing of time, or perhaps signaling the start of a new task. The faint echo of footsteps, soldiers, merchants, children playing, moves through the air, punctuated by the occasional barking of a dog or the squeal of a pig. The streets are busy, chaotic in their own way, yet there's an underlying rhythm, a pulse that keeps everything moving. Your senses are overwhelmed by the smell of smoke and sweat, fumes from a nearby fire, the acrid sting of vinegar, and the pungent aroma of fresh bread baking in a clay oven. The air carries the scent of roasted meat, perhaps a fragment of a feast long finished or a meal still underway. You notice the coolness of the stone beneath your fingertips, rough and uneven, and the coarse fabric of your clothes against your skin, hardly the soft comfort of your modern bed. When you breathe, it's as if you're inhaling history itself, each breath thick with stories, struggles, and the unyielding spirit of those who came before. Your tongue tastes the remnants of the last meal, dull stale bread, and a sip of water that's cloudy with mineral deposits. You consider reaching for something to drink, but suddenly realize your throat is parched, the dryness a stark reminder of how different this world is from your own. Perhaps you'd reach for your water bottle or your coffee mug, but here the simplest act is a ritual of patience and persistence. And then a flicker of emotion stirs within you, an odd mix of curiosity and bemusement. You find yourself thinking, this is not the world I know. Your idea of a bad morning once might have been forgetting your phone charger or running late for work. Here, it's realizing that your mask, your breathing shield, smells worse than the patients you're meant to help, or that your clothes are so coarse they could scratch the paint off a chariot wheel. It's strange, almost amusing how life's discomforts have evolved, yet somehow remain just as persistent. In this moment, you instinctively reach out to adjust your clothing, perhaps to straighten a tunic or tighten a strap. You sit up, feeling the roughness of the floor beneath your hands, and glance around. Your eyes catch a glimpse of the surroundings, a small, open square bustling with life. Market stalls line the edges, their fabric awnings fluttering in the breeze, offering everything from vibrant textiles to shimmering jewelry. Children run past, their laughter ringing out, chasing each other with reckless joy. A merchant calls out, his voice rising above the hum, hawking spices and olives. A group of soldiers in chainmail pass by, their armor clinking softly, eyes wary but accustomed to this daily chaos. You notice the people's reactions towards you. Some glance at you with a mix of respect and caution, perhaps recognizing you as someone of importance, or simply wary of the unfamiliar. Others seem curious, whispering amongst themselves or casting sideways glances. Their expressions are a mosaic of emotions: respect, curiosity, maybe a hint of fear. You realize that your presence, your attire, even your posture commands a subtle but undeniable attention. As you take in the scene, it becomes clear this is not your time nor your world. The architecture, the sounds, the smells, all point towards a distant past, a radically different place. Yet the life here pulses with the same raw energy, the same endless striving, the same chaotic beauty that defines human existence through all ages. To truly understand where you've just woken up, you need to step back, to look at the bigger picture, the world that shaped this moment and made it possible. But for now, let yourself linger in this strange, vibrant place, where history, sweat, and stories intertwine, and prepare to discover how you, a gladiator from ancient Rome, have found yourself caught in a challenge unlike any arena you've known before. The era you've just woken up in is the height of the Roman Empire, perhaps around the 2nd century AD, during the reign of one of its many emperors, maybe Marcus Aurelius or Commodus, kings of a sprawling civilization that prides itself on order, strength, and an unshakable sense of destiny. In this vast mosaic of stone, sand, and sweat, you're caught in a society built on layers, like a layered loaf of bread, where nobility sits comfortably atop, cloaked in silks and gold, while the common folk toil endlessly beneath. The aristocrats, the senators in their marble temples, hold the reins of power, their voices echoing through the marble halls of Rome or the provincial towns. Meanwhile, the clergy, priests, and augurs keep watch over the divine, their rituals woven into the fabric of everyday life, whispering secrets to gods and spirits that are just as real in their minds as the bricks of the city. The mercantile class, busy with their caravans and markets, hustle day and night, trying to turn a profit from olives, wool, or exotic spices. Then there are the peasants, many of whom wake before dawn, their hands rough from work, their days filled with planting, harvesting, or tending animals. The gap between the rich and the poor is vast, like the difference between a polished marble statue and a battered wooden cart. The wealthy dine on bread soaked in honey, wine warmed over the hearth, and meats roasted on open flames, while the poor scrape together what little they can, often relying on the generosity of a neighbor or the charity of a temple. Power is a game of influence, wealth, and sometimes just sheer luck. The emperor commands with an iron fist, but his authority depends on the loyalty of legions of soldiers and the whims of the Senate. Citizens obey out of tradition, fear, or hope, sometimes all three, while slaves and laborers work tirelessly, their lives a constant dance of survival. Step outside your dwelling and the world around you bursts into life, a scene more lively than a market on the day of Saturnalia, but with more pigs than people. Streets are paved with stones that have seen centuries of footsteps, chariot wheels, and the occasional stray dog trotting by. Market stalls spill over with fruits, cheeses, and embroidered textiles, their vendors shouting, bargaining, and laughing, an endless cacophony that's somehow familiar in its chaos. The air is thick with smells, fumes of cooking fires, the sharp tang of vinegar, the aroma of fresh fish, and the lingering scent of sweat from the laboring masses. You might see children darting between legs, their laughter ringing out like bells, while soldiers in armor stride past, their faces stern, but their eyes occasionally flicking to the crowds with a mixture of suspicion and boredom. Women in flowing tunics barter over spices, their hands quick and precise, while an old man with a long beard tells stories to anyone willing to listen. You notice that everyone's reactions to you are a blend of respect and curiosity, perhaps because of your strange attire or the way you carry yourself. Some folks glance at you as if you're a figure from legend, while others avoid eye contact altogether, wary of strangers in these bustling streets. As you stand amid this whirl of life, you can't help but feel a certain awe. This is a world of great monuments, mighty aqueducts, and sprawling forums. Yet it's also a place where daily life is a constant struggle, a balancing act of perseverance and hope. Now, as your gaze wanders across the horizon, it becomes clear that you're not simply in a city or a town. You're in the heart of an empire that's shaped by politics, religion, and conflict. The political landscape is a tangled web. Emperors wield absolute power, yet their authority depends on armies of soldiers and the intricate dance of alliances in the Senate. Sometimes a new ruler's rise is as sudden as a lightning strike, and sometimes it's a slow, deliberate climb fueled by intrigue and betrayal. The empire is a patchwork of different peoples, Romans, Gauls, Germans, Egyptians, each with their own customs, gods, and stories, yet all part of this grand mosaic. Wars are frequent, whether to defend borders or to expand them. Invasions come from barbarian tribes lurking beyond the mountains, their names as mysterious as their motives. The countryside is dotted with forts, watchtowers, and small villages, all connected by roads that resemble the veins of a living creature, some paved and impressive, others muddy and barely passable after a rainstorm. The landscape is a patchwork of rolling hills, lush fields, and arid plains, each whispering stories of conquest and survival. Religion in this world is not a quiet affair. It's woven into every aspect of life, public festivals, daily prayers, and the rituals of the temples. Gods like Jupiter and Mars are revered as mighty protectors, while household spirits and minor deities watch over the little details of daily existence. Superstitions are everywhere. People carry charms or avoid walking under ladders, believing it could bring misfortune. Some believe that carrying a handful of onions in your pocket could ward off the plague. Talk about organic medicine. Others swear that sniffing flowers soaked in vinegar was a safer way to avoid illness. than washing your hands or staying indoors. Masks, but make it medieval, no longer just for masquerades but for warding off spirits or evil eyes. In this era, life is a mix of routines and rituals, waking with the first crow of a crowing rooster or the tolling of city bells. The day's work is repetitive but necessary, farming, crafting, fighting, or tending to animals, all with their own peculiarities. Taking a bath was almost considered suspicious, like announcing to your neighbors that you were planning something shady. Instead, most cleaned themselves with a sponge, a basin of water, or simply hoped their dirt would wash away with time. Your modern frustrations, like trying to get a stubborn Wi-Fi connection, are nothing compared to the challenge of lighting damp wood in the rain or carrying heavy buckets of water up a hill. That was the medieval equivalent of CrossFit, but with less encouragement and more mud. Politically, the world is governed by emperors, kings, and local rulers, each vying for control, their decisions echoing through the streets and the courts. Wars and invasions are constant threats, and the shadow of the next barbarian raid or civil upheaval looms large. The church and temples hold sway over the collective mind, faith and superstition intertwined in a dance as old as the stones themselves. People pray for good harvests, victory in battle, or protection from unseen evils. The divine and the mundane are inseparable here, and faith is often the only thing that keeps chaos at bay. And just when you think you've grasped the oddities of this world, a few amusing truths sneak in, like the fact that some believed carrying a handful of onions in your pocket could ward off the plague, or that sniffing vinegar-soaked flowers was a safer bet than staying indoors. Masks, but make it medieval, coverings made from cloth or animal hides, used not for health reasons, but for warding off spirits or evil eyes. It's a different kind of hygiene, one woven into the fabric of their superstitions and daily rituals. Now that you understand the broad strokes, the grand landscape, the social layers, the political chaos, let's zoom in closer. Enough about kings, priests, and plagues. Let's see what happens when you try to wash your face here, in this ancient, bustling world, and how your story begins to unfold in the midst of it all. You begin your morning with a slow, deliberate awakening, your body stiff from sleep, but eager for the day ahead. As the first light seeps through small, narrow windows, perhaps a crack in a wooden shutter, you stretch your limbs with a quiet yawn. Your muscles protest tight and unyielding like a bow pulled too far, and you instinctively reach for the basin of cold water sitting on a rough-hewn table or a corner of your simple home. You dip your hands into the water, feeling the chill bite into your skin, sharp and invigorating, like a splash of winter in the midst of a warm, stuffy night. With a few quick scoops, you bring the water up to your face, splashing it over your cheeks and forehead, watching as the cold droplets bead and trickle down your skin. It's a primitive ritual, one that leaves your face feeling raw but somehow refreshed, though not exactly clean by modern standards. No fragrant soap or foaming gel here, just water, sometimes lukewarm, often straight from a well, a river, or a shared community source. The act is simple, yet effective enough to wake you from the haze of sleep, preparing you for whatever the day may bring. Hygiene in this era isn't about aesthetic perfection or elaborate routines. It's a matter of necessity, wrapped in a web of beliefs and customs. The idea of taking a full bath, an immersion in a steaming pool, or a long soak in a tub might seem suspicious or even dangerous. Many considered it unnecessary or even harmful, associating baths with illness or weakness. Instead, they relied on quick rinses, wiping with rough cloths, or dabbing herbs and perfumes to mask odors. You might have a small bundle of dried herbs, rosemary, thyme, or lavender, that you crush and sprinkle into the water, hoping to purify the air around you or ward off disease. Or perhaps you pour a little vinegar into the basin, an ancient antiseptic, or dab a cloth soaked in scented oils onto your neck and wrists, trying to mask the earthy smell of sweat and dirt. Forget your 10-step skincare routine. Here, survival is splashing some water and hoping the smell doesn't scare the neighbors. Inside your humble dwelling, the ambiance is humble but functional. The walls, dark and rough-hewn, are made of wood or clay, giving off a faint scent of smoke and earth. The fireplace crackles softly, its smoke curling upward through a small chimney or vent, and the air is thick with the smell of burning wood and herbs. You might see a small shelf of clay pots, some filled with dried grains or legumes. Utensils and tools made of bronze, iron, or simple wood are scattered about, their surfaces scarred from years of use. Ropes and cloth hang from nails, and a worn, leather-bound satchel rests nearby, holding your few personal belongings. The floor beneath your feet is uneven, with splinters and cracks that make every step a little uncertain, the wood or stone creaking softly with each movement. The scent of burnt wood mingles with the faint aroma of damp clothing or wet leather, creating a cozy but gritty atmosphere that feels both ancient and lived in. Your clothing reflects the simplicity of daily life, rough wool tunics, heavy and itchy, designed more for durability than comfort. The fabric feels coarse against your skin, like hugging a hedgehog in a wool sweater. Your footwear, simple sandals or sturdy leather shoes, are uncomfortable yet necessary, especially when you step outside into the busy streets or uneven paths. You notice how your body reacts, perhaps a little itching from the coarse fabric, a hint of cold that lingers in your bones, or the stiffness that comes from hours of wearing heavy gear or armor. It's a far cry from the soft, breathable fabrics and seamless sneakers of your modern wardrobe. The contrast is stark. Your idea of uncomfortable clothing might be a scratchy sweater, but here, it's wool that feels like it's hugging a spiny animal. As you prepare to leave the house, your first meal awaits. It's simple, perhaps a crusty piece of bread, dense and hard enough to test your teeth, paired with a slice of aged cheese, its flavor sharp and tangy. Maybe a bowl of caldo, a thin, watery stew made from leftover vegetables and a bit of salt, served in a rough clay bowl that feels cool and gritty against your palms. Every bite is a reminder of how different sustenance is here, compared to the quick, convenient snacks you're used to. No fancy coffee or smoothies, just basic, hearty fare that keeps you going through the day's demands. The flavors are raw, honest, and sometimes a little dull, but they carry a sense of tradition and resilience. Hygiene rituals here are intertwined with superstitions and beliefs. Before heading out, you might perform a small ritual, touching a talisman, crossing yourself, or muttering a prayer for protection. Often people carry amulets made from bones, stones, or herbs, believed to ward off sickness or evil spirits. Some might burn incense or herbs like sage or thyme, filling the room with fragrant smoke, hoping to purify the space or keep unseen malevolence at bay. Others recite blessings or prayers asking divine favor for health and safety. The idea of cleanliness is less about appearance and more about spiritual purity, keeping the evil eye away or ensuring a good harvest. It's a world where washing isn't a daily luxury, but a ritual of faith, and where a simple splash of water might be enough to feel a little less earthy, a little more blessed. As you step outside into the bustling village or town, the day begins anew, a symphony of sounds, smells, and textures that define this ancient life. You might feel a faint prickling itch from the coarse fabric rubbing against your skin or the slight chill of morning air on your damp face. Everything is textured and tangible, rough stone walls, splintered wooden carts, the uneven cobblestones underfoot. The smells of bread baking, animals in the street, and fires burning in the hearth mingle with the scent of sweat and earth. You're acutely aware of your body, its needs, its discomforts, and its resilience, reminding you that here life is raw and real, demanding your attention and respect. And yet, amid all this, there's a strange comfort, an acceptance of the simple essentials that keep you moving forward. No sleek gadgets, no endless stream of notifications, just physical effort, ritualistic habits, and the quiet knowledge that survival hinges on these small, often overlooked acts. You carry on with a sense of purpose, knowing that today's routines are the foundation of a life built on endurance, tradition, and a touch of ancient magic. Now, with your morning rituals complete, it's time to face the outside world, ready to see what adventures or challenges await beyond the humble walls of your home. You step out of your modest dwelling, feeling the cool morning air brush against your skin. Perhaps a light mist clings to the cobblestones, damp and slightly sticky from the night's dew. The ground beneath your feet crunches softly, a mixture of dirt, gravel, and stubborn stones that have been worn smooth by generations of footsteps. The air carries a faint scent of smoke from distant fires, mingled with the earthy aroma of wet soil and the faint, pungent odor of livestock. As you move through the village or small town, the movement of people around you is a steady, familiar rhythm. Children scamper past, their shrill voices ringing out as they chase each other, dodging carts and stray animals. Traders shout out their wares, spices, textiles, pottery, each voice rising above the others like a noisy choir of commerce. Men and women, wrapped in rough fabrics, go about their routines, some carrying baskets of herbs, others leading cattle or hauling water. You wear your role like a badge, perhaps a simple tunic, reinforced with leather, a pouch of tools or herbs at your side, and a sturdy cloak that drapes loosely over your shoulders. The weight of your tools or the scent of herbs tucked into your pouch reminds you of your purpose, whether it's tending to the sick, hunting game, or defending your community. Today, your function is clear. You're here to serve, to maintain order, to protect, or perhaps to heal. Roles woven into the fabric of this society as naturally as the sun rises each morning. As you walk, your presence does not go unnoticed. Children stare at you, half curious, half terrified, eyebrows raised, eyes wide, whispering behind their hands. Adults glance at you with a mixture of respect and wariness, some nodding politely, others giving wary nods or avoiding eye contact altogether. You're a figure of importance, or at least of authority, in their eyes, even if you're just another face in the crowd. You might be a soldier, a craftsman, or a healer, but your role is embedded deeply into the social fabric. You navigate between different groups, noble landowners in their fine tunics, proud soldiers in their armor, humble farmers with dirt-stained hands, and religious figures cloaked in simple robes, their faces solemn and contemplative. Each interaction carries its own weight, formal greetings, quick exchanges of information, or discreet gestures of deference. You're part of a complex dance of social obligation, where respect and suspicion are exchanged like currency. Perhaps you exchange a few words with a merchant, feeling the rough texture of his woven cloak, or nod at a soldier passing by, the metal of his armor clinking with each stride. You might overhear a heated debate about the harvest, or a priest blessing the fields, incense smoke curling into the air, its scent sharp and spicy. Sometimes you're called upon to perform a task, examining a sick farmer's leg, inspecting the livestock for signs of disease, or helping to load supplies onto a cart. Each activity involves a sensory experience, the roughness of the wooden tools in your hand, the smell of freshly cut herbs, the coarse fabric of the clothing you wear, or the sticky warmth of sweat on your brow. Your work is not glamorous, but it's vital. It's the backbone of daily life, keeping the community functioning, maintaining the fragile balance between order and chaos. You might be surprised by some of the peculiar beliefs that surround your duties. Some think that carrying a small bone or a piece of charcoal can ward off illness, or that wearing a particular amulet will protect you from curses. Others believe that speaking a certain prayer or performing a specific gesture will keep evil spirits at bay. You might chuckle at the idea that some villagers burn a handful of herbs as a protective charm, believing it will clear the air of disease, almost like a medieval air freshener, if air fresheners were made of dried herbs and superstition. Or perhaps you've heard that a simple act, like placing a stone under a sick person's pillow, can help their fever break, a quaint belief that still holds sway in the hearts of many. Behind every busy market stall and every wary glance, there's a deeper fear that shapes this world, fear of disease, of invasion, of divine punishment. The community's rhythm ebbs and flows with festivals, rituals, and military drills. People prepare for upcoming festivals with offerings to gods, processions winding through the streets, and communal feasts that reinforce social bonds. The local militia trains regularly, practicing formations in open spaces, their armor glinting in the sunlight, the clatter of wooden shields echoing across the fields. You're part of this larger movement, contributing your skills, your presence, your purpose. Every day is a blend of routine and ritual, woven into the collective effort to survive and thrive. And as you move through this bustling world, you sense the underlying currents of superstition and hope, beliefs that hold this society together amidst chaos. You're a vital piece of this tapestry, whether you're tending to the sick, guarding the gates, or simply fulfilling your role with quiet pride. But behind every busy market stall and every cautious glance, there's a deeper fear that shapes this world, a collective consciousness rooted in superstition, faith, and the unyielding belief that today, like every day, must be faced with resilience. And as you prepare to step further into this complex web of social and spiritual duties, you can feel a weight of the centuries pressing down, reminding you that your place here is both fragile and essential. Now, with your role clear and your purpose understood, it's time to move on to face whatever challenges or duties await beyond this familiar, textured landscape. It's in the way children clutch their amulets tightly, fingers tracing the carved symbols that are supposed to ward off evil, while elders cross themselves with trembling hands. Fear here is like the smoke from 100 chimneys, thick, persistent, filling the air whether you want it or not. It lingers in the shadows of the narrow streets, in the hushed silence of the churches, where the heavy air is scented with incense and the faint, bitter aroma of burnt wax. The bells toll solemnly, echoing through the city at funerals, their deep chimes a mournful reminder of mortality. Every face seems marked by the weight of unseen threats, diseases that sweep through the populace like invisible enemies, hunger gnawing at stomachs as relentless as the tides, or wars looming on distant horizons, threatening to spill into your streets at any moment. You feel it in the way the community reacts, eyes darting nervously, shoulders hunched in anxious anticipation of the next calamity, as if life itself is balanced on a fragile thread. Religiosity is woven into the very fabric of this world. It's in the daily rituals, signs of the cross made with trembling fingers before starting work, prayers murmured in the marketplace, the quick crossing of oneself when passing a church or a shrine. Images of saints and divine figures are everywhere, painted on walls, carved into wooden plaques, embroidered onto fabrics. You see processions winding through the city, their participants chanting hymns, their voices rising and falling like waves. Monks in coarse robes march silently, their heads bowed in devotion, their footsteps echoing on the stone pavements. Churches overflow with flickering candles, casting a flickering glow that dances on the faces of the faithful, the scent of burning incense filling the air, smoky, sweet, almost intoxicating. It's as if the entire city breathes in the prayers and exhalations of hope and desperation. Today, you might scroll through a digital feed for comfort, your modern equivalent of seeking solace in endless streams of images and messages. But here, people clutch rosaries like life jackets in a storm, their fingers moving almost automatically, seeking connection with divine protection, hoping their prayers will stave off the inevitable. Superstitions and folk beliefs are the secret language of survival. Amulets made of bones, herbs, and stones hang from necks and belts, each one a tiny talisman against the unseen demons. Small pouches filled with dried herbs are tied around waists, their scents, lavender, thyme, garlic, believed to repel spirits or sickness. Symbols drawn on doorframes or woven into fabrics act as magic shields, warding off evil eyes and malevolent spirits. You might see a woman sprinkle a handful of salt over her doorstep, whispering a hurried prayer, or a man burning a mixture of herbs and resins, hoping it will purify the air of miasma, the foul, rotten breath of disease they believe pollutes the environment. It's the medieval version of essential oils, except with a slightly higher chance of accidental poisoning, and possibly more effective at scaring away spirits than curing actual illnesses. Some believe that carrying a dead toad in your pocket could ward off the plague, an odd, slimy charm that's as bizarre as it is believed. Others think whipping themselves in the streets during festivals will earn divine mercy, their blood and sweat offering a sacrificial plea for salvation. These rituals, often performed in the open, are as much about community as they are about superstition, shared acts that reinforce collective hope and collective fear. And fear here is a unifying yet dividing force. It binds communities together through shared rituals, but it can also turn neighbors into enemies. The fear of the plague is palpable, an invisible, insidious threat that makes everyone paranoid. People are quick to point fingers at outsiders or those who look different, whispering accusations of witchcraft or heresy. Rumors spread faster than the disease itself. An infected person might be lynched or expelled before anyone truly understands the cause. Factions form, alliances are tested, and mass hysteria can erupt at a moment's notice. You see it in the frantic mobs gathering to hunt witches, or in the resigned faces of families who barricade themselves inside, refusing to leave their homes out of fear. The community lives in this constant state of alert. Every cough, every fever, every shadow is a sign of impending disaster. It's as if the very air is charged with anxiety, each breath a gamble against unseen forces. In this tumultuous atmosphere, your role takes on a complex significance. As a healer, a priest, or perhaps a supposed protector against spirits, you are both a source of hope and suspicion. People look at you with a mixture of reverence and doubt. Some see you as a divine instrument, anointed to save them from disease or misfortune, their eyes filled with desperate trust. Others whisper behind your back, questioning your methods or accusing you of being in league with malevolent powers. A villager may clutch their rosary tighter when you approach, eyes flickering with fear. Are you a savior or a conduit of the sickness? Your actions are scrutinized. Every prayer, every herb, every gesture carries weight. You are under constant watch, your words carefully chosen, your presence both a balm and a potential curse. Strange beliefs and bizarre practices are woven into the fabric of this fear. Some believed that carrying a dead toad in your pocket could ward off the plague, an odd, slimy talisman that seemed more like a joke than a cure. Others thought that whipping themselves in the streets would earn God's mercy. Blood and sweat poured freely, a public display of penitence meant to appease divine wrath. The idea of blood as a sacred antidote or of performing strange rituals at dawn to banish spirits is as common as the morning prayers. You might chuckle softly at these customs, recognizing the humor in their earnestness, like a modern person trying aromatherapy, but with a higher chance of accidentally poisoning themselves. Fear here is like a shadow that stretches over every aspect of life, unseen but felt in every breath. It unites the community through shared rituals, yet it divides through suspicion and violence. It's the invisible thread that connects the sick to the healers, the faithful to the divine, the community to its collective hope and dread. It's a fragile, delicate web, ready to crack at any moment, yet surprisingly resilient. And even in this world heavy with fear, you sense a strange comfort in the rituals. The flickering candles, the whispered prayers, the symbols drawn on walls, these are the anchors that hold the community together amidst chaos. They are like the faint glow of a lantern in a storm, guiding, reassuring, reminding everyone that no matter how dark the night, there is always hope. As you prepare to leave this atmosphere of trembling faith and collective dread, know that beyond the fear and superstition, there are bonds, fragile, human, surprisingly resilient. Connections forged in prayer, in shared rituals, in whispered secret. All these are what keep the community moving forward. And even in a world haunted by shadows, life persists, simple, stubborn, and undeniably human. You quickly notice how, despite the harshness of life, the constant threat of disease, the looming shadows of war, and the ever-present weight of fear, people still cling to each other with a surprising tenacity. It's in the way neighbors lean on one another, not just for bread or warmth, but for a kind of comfort that only another heartbeat nearby can bring. When a family sits together in their simple home, the flickering light of an oil lamp casts shadows that dance across their faces, revealing lines carved by worry but also by love. You see children curled up against their grandparents, seeking safety in the warmth of shared presence, as if proximity itself could ward off the chaos lurking outside. Forget Netflix family drama. Here, your cousin might literally sleep on the floor 2 feet away from you every single night because space is scarce and trust is precious. The family unit is both a fortress and a prison, obligations binding you tight yet confining, with no easy escape from the duties of kinship. Elders command respect, children are loved but expected to obey, and everyone understands that their survival depends on these bonds. In the narrow, crowded streets, small acts of friendship unfold daily. Neighbors passing a bowl of stew, a hand helping to lift a heavy load, whispered advice shared under the shade of a fig tree. These gestures are the threads that weave community together, the quiet acts of solidarity that remind you that you're not alone in this world of uncertainty. You hear the gossip, the disputes over land or livestock, the whispered accusations of witchcraft when a neighbor's cow suddenly falls ill, reminding you that trust is fragile, easily shattered by suspicion or envy. Yet amid these tensions there's warmth too. A shared loaf of bread, a borrowed knife, a joke whispered in the marketplace. These are small victories against the darkness, moments when laughter briefly brightens the gloom. Romance in this world is a delicate dance. Perhaps you catch a fleeting glance from someone across a smoky tavern, their eyes lingering just a second longer than polite. Maybe a young couple exchanges promises of marriage under the watchful gaze of their families, their voices hushed but filled with hope. Or perhaps it's a secret meeting in the shadows, where a stolen kiss is exchanged beneath the flickering torchlight, risking everything for a moment of tenderness. Your modern Tinder swipes? Here, it's a glance across a crowded square, a smile shared beneath a veil of smoke and dust, a tentative dance if the fiddles don't break during the feast. Love here is both a rebellion and a necessity, an anchor to cling to amid the chaos, yet often an impossible dream overshadowed by duty and tradition. Hierarchy shapes every relationship, a constant reminder of who is above and who must serve. The noble landowner's gaze is haughty, their words weighted with privilege, yet they depend on the labor of peasants whose backs bend beneath the weight of the harvest. The clergymen, dressed in their robes and carrying their scrolls, hold sway over the spiritual life, respected by some, feared by others. You, as a healer or perhaps a spiritual guide, occupy a peculiar space, respected by many, yet never fully trusted. To some, you're a divine instrument, a conduit of the God's will. To others, a suspicious figure whose remedies might be worse than the disease. The way people treat you depends on their faith and fears. Some whisper prayers when you approach, others cast wary glances, clutching their charms tighter. They might believe you have powers, or they might think you secretly consort with spirits you shouldn't. Either way, your presence stirs a mixture of reverence and suspicion, like a shadow that flickers just beyond the firelight. Community rituals are the heartbeat of these social bonds. You find yourself immersed in processions, cloaked figures chanting hymns as they wind through the streets, their voices rising over the clatter of carts and the bleating of sheep. During festivals, everyone dons colorful clothes, bright dyes, embroidered fabrics, feathers, transforming the city into a living tapestry of noise and scent. The smell of baked bread wafts from the baker's oven, mingling with the sweet aroma of honey and roasted nuts. The sound of flutes and drums fills the air, inviting dance and celebration even amid the shadows of fear. At funerals, you witness the community's grief, cloaked figures weeping, candles flickering in the dark, the scent of incense thick enough to make your eyes water. These gatherings remind you that life persists through these collective moments, sacred, messy, full of hope and sorrow all at once. But it's not all harmony. Rivalries simmer beneath the surface, disputes over land, jealousies over a neighbor's better harvest, accusations flying when someone's child falls ill. Gossip spreads faster than news, and a simple rumor can turn friends into enemies. You observe how, in times of crisis, the community's trust fractures, accusations of witchcraft surface when a young woman's livestock die and mobs gather, their torchlights flickering like fireflies in the night. Public punishments are both justice and entertainment, twisted spectacles where the guilty are whipped or humiliated, watched by crowds eager for spectacle. It's a brutal reminder that social cohesion depends on shared fears as much as shared joys. Your role in this intricate dance of relationships is complex. As a healer, a priest, or a local figure of authority, you are both part of the community's fabric and a reflection of its deepest anxieties. People look at you with a mixture of hope and suspicion, an ambiguous symbol of salvation and danger. When you approach, they might clutch their amulets tighter or step back a little, whispering prayers under their breath. You're trusted enough to be relied upon, yet always under the watchful eye of collective superstition. Your words can bring comfort, or they can stir unrest, sometimes both at once. You become a silent witness to their fears, their secrets, their hopes. You see it in the way a mother presses her hand on her child's forehead, whispering a prayer, or in the way a farmer hesitates before revealing a strange mark on his livestock. You're part of their stories, woven into the tapestry of their lives, just as they are woven into yours. Strange and amusing beliefs persist, like the idea that carrying a small bone in your pocket could ward off the plague, or that wearing a particular charm might keep the spirits at bay. Some believe that sneezing during a wedding is a sign of good luck, unless it's a bad omen, in which case it's a curse. Public punishments, like the community's version of reality TV, are often performed as acts of collective penance or catharsis, sometimes brutal, sometimes absurd, always a spectacle. These customs might seem bizarre today, but they're deeply rooted in the community's need to make sense of chaos. Rituals that reinforce social bonds even as they remind everyone of the thin line between order and disorder. And of course, you understand that beneath all the rituals and superstitions there is one thing that unites everyone: the unyielding hope that tomorrow might be better, that despite the shadows, despite the threats, life will continue, fragile, fleeting, but undeniably human. As you look around at these bonds, struggled, tested, yet enduring, you realize that even in a brutal world, it's these connections that keep the flames alive. And perhaps in the end, it's these bonds that will carry them through whatever darkness awaits. The light from a flickering oil lamp casts a warm glow, illuminating the scattered fragments of your modest feast. The air is thick with the aroma of a slow-simmered pottage, an earthy blend of legumes, grains, and herbs, its surface shimmering with a thin film of olive oil. Nearby, a loaf of coarse bread, crusty and uneven, rests on a rough clay trencher, its scent mingling with the sharpness of garlic and the pungent aroma of aged cheese. A bowl of salted fish, dried and flaky, sits beside a handful of eggs, their shells cracked open to reveal bright, yolky centers. The utensils are humble, wooden spoons carved with simple grooves, a dull knife with a leather-wrapped handle, and a small cup of rough metal, perhaps a battered bronze or tin, waiting to be filled with something stronger than water. You might have a rag, stained and well-loved, to wipe your hands, or a shallow basin of water, muddy but sufficient, to wash away the dust and grease that cling to your fingers after a long day. The scene is a quiet contrast to the bustling markets outside, where vendors shout prices like a chorus of hawkers, and the smell of roasted meats, freshly baked bread, and spiced wine fills the air like an intoxicating promise of abundance. Here, the menu of your daily life is simple: a humble porridge of beans and barley, seasoned with a handful of herbs, perhaps a sprig of sage, or a pinch of thyme, simmered slowly over an open flame. On special days, if the gods have smiled upon you, there might be a piece of dried sausage or a handful of dried figs, their sweet aroma offering a fleeting taste of luxury. The common fare is nourishing, if not luxurious, designed to fill the belly and sustain the strength needed for another day of toil, whether it's tending fields, smithing, or fighting in the arena. The elite, of course, indulge in meats roasted to a glossy sheen, seasoned with rare spices brought from distant lands: pepper, saffron, cinnamon, alongside fruits preserved in honey, their candied sweetness a stark contrast to your straightforward meal. Their tables are laden with dishes that gleam with oil and spice, served on fine pottery, with goblets of wine, deep, red, fragrant, clinking softly as they toast to fortunes made and lost. But your table follows a different rhythm. You observe the rituals before eating, a quick crossing of yourself, a whispered prayer for health and protection, or simply a moment to breathe in the scent of herbs and bread. Sometimes, washing your hands is a hurried affair, dipping fingers into a basin of cold water, wiping them on a rag, or just rinsing them in a stream if you're lucky enough to be near one. Portions are measured with a practical eye, no excess, no waste, because scarcity is always lurking just beyond the horizon. Even in times of plenty, The idea of wasting food feels like a crime, a sin against the gods and your ancestors. You might watch as a neighbor carefully slices a piece of cheese, the knife scraping against the rough surface, or listen to the clatter of a spoon against a ceramic bowl as someone eats with quiet satisfaction. The act of sharing is a solemn one, passing bread, pouring a cup of sour wine, exchanging a few words about the weather or the latest news from the forum. In this world, food is more than sustenance. It's a gesture of alliance, a signal of status, an act of faith. The marketplace outside buzzes with life, vendors shouting their wares, the grating of a baker's wheel turning dough, the scent of freshly baked bread mingling with the sour tang of fermented grain. You see the baker's apron streaked with flour, the blacksmith's soot-smudged face, the fishmonger's hands sticky with salt and scales. You cross their paths, sometimes bartering, sometimes simply observing the dance of commerce. In the back of your mind, you recognize how each ingredient and every shared meal carries its own story, of trade routes, of distant lands, of gods and spirits invoked in the act of eating. Some believe that the gods favor those who eat with gratitude, that offering a prayer before a meal invites divine blessing. Others hold that excess is a sign of hubris, an insult to the gods who remind mortals that life is fleeting and fragile. So you eat with a measured reverence, savoring the salt on your tongue, the warmth of the bread in your hand, the bitter undertaste of the wine that's not quite sweet enough. You know that after the meal, the city breathes again, the streets filling with laughter, music spilling from taverns and the shadows growing longer as the night approaches. The feast's end is not just a moment of hunger relief, but a pause, an acknowledgement that life, despite its hardships, is woven through with moments of shared flavor and quiet camaraderie. And as you wipe your hands on your cloth, you feel the subtle promise tomorrow's meal will come, and with it, another chapter in the story of this bustling, resilient world. Soon, the city will seek music, dance, and small acts of defiance, valiant or foolish, against the darkness of the night. But for now, you sit quietly, your stomach slightly fuller, your heart lighter, and the simple joy of nourishment settling deep within you. The scent of warm ale lingers in the air, mingling with the dampness of wet sawdust from the tavern's floor, a familiar perfume that invites both comfort and the faintest tremor of anticipation. Shadows stretch long and lazy, creeping along the walls as laughter and muffled voices rise and fall in a steady rhythm, an ancient pulse echoing through the winding alleys. You find yourself walking toward the tavern, its door slightly ajar, a portal to the lively chaos inside. Against the rough wooden benches, bodies settle into familiar patterns, some leaning back with a mug in hand, others gesturing animatedly over a game of dice. The bar, dark and scarred from years of use, hums with the sound of pouring drinks, clinking earthenware, the scrape of a bone spoon against a clay bowl, and the occasional burst of a raucous song. You notice a group gathered around a 9-men's Morris board, their fingers tracing the wooden pieces, whispering bets and hopes as the dice tumble across the surface like promises of luck, only to fall, more often than not, as a cruel reminder that chance is a fickle mistress, falling flat like a boleto that never clears. A drunken tune rises from a corner, an imperfect, rough-hewn melody played on a lute or a Rebecca, the notes wandering like lost children in the night. A few steps in, you see the dancers forming a circle, their boots stamping a simple, primal rhythm, their movements a humble prayer to some unseen force, a dance that keeps the darkness at bay. Sweat beads on their foreheads, but their smiles shine brighter than the lanterns, the shared joy weaving a fragile armor against the shadows outside. The dance is unpolished, the steps familiar and steady, like the heartbeat of the city itself. Beyond the merriment, the city's soul hums with the echoes of theater and ritual, an impromptu stage set up on a dusty square where figures in patchwork costumes enact morality plays. The audience, a mixture of curiosity and reverence, watches as characters representing virtues and vices clash amid simple props and painted cloth backdrops. Sometimes a miracle or a mystery unfolds, a healer's apprentice dramatizing a saint's intervention, or a storyteller weaving tales of saints' deeds beneath a canopy of stars. The audience's laughter and whispers mingle with the faint scent of candelabra wax and herbs, their reverence softened by the earthy humor of the actors' awkward gestures. As the night deepens, however, a darker note emerges. The flagellants arrive, men and women clad in rough cloth, their faces pale yet resolute, marching in silence through the streets. Their presence is both unsettling and sacred, a reminder of penance and fear that lurk beneath the festival's veneer. They begin their fervent sermons, voices rising in a chorus that cuts through the night with a mixture of supplication and panic, superstitions whispering that the darkness whispers back, that the gods are watching and judging. Sometimes a public spectacle unfolds, a condemned sinner or a misguided soul suffering an exemplary punishment, a reminder that even in celebration the shadows of mortality and morality linger, silent witnesses to the fragile thread on which life hangs. You catch the respectful gaze of a fellow healer or doctor, your eyes meeting for a fleeting moment, sharing a silent acknowledgement of the delicate balance between life and death that underpins all this revelry. Someone approaches you seeking a quick word, perhaps a blessing or a warning, a whisper that the night's joys are but a fleeting veneer over the truths you carry within. Your hand instinctively touches the edge of your cloak or the small amulet around your neck. An old habit, a reassurance that even amid the raucous laughter and the dancing shadows, the unseen forces remain close, whispering their secrets. The music shifts. An alaud strums softly, the strings echoing like a heartbeat, while flutes and tambourines add their voices to the night's symphony. The dancers' feet mark the rhythm, simple, steady, almost like a prayer, each step a silent ode to life's fleeting brightness. You move among them, your own body swaying gently, feeling the warm sweat on your brow, the roughness of the worn leather of your sandals grounding you in the present. This dance, this song, is a fragile defiance of the darkness, a reminder that joy persists even when shadows loom. When the final notes fade or the last torch is snuffed, the city's heartbeat slows, yet the echoes remain. The silence that follows is filled with the faint scent of Cera Quente, soft wax from the candles, and the distant aroma of herbs burned for protection. The night's rituals, both sacred and profane, remind you that everything begins and ends in cycles: birth, celebration, fear, and finally, acceptance. In these moments, amid laughter and shadows, you can feel the delicate edge of mortality, the truth that every festival, every dance is a fleeting burst of life's resilience, a testament to the enduring hope that come dawn, the city will awaken anew, ready to face what comes next. And so, as you walk back through the quiet streets, the distant toll of a bell reminds you. All stories, all lives, move in a dance as old as time, an endless rhythm of birth and departure, of promise and farewell. When the last note is played and the night's shadows settle, The city whispers softly in a voice that's both tender and knowing. Everything that begins will also come to an end. You recall the gentle arrival of life, the quiet miracle of a newborn's first cry, like a tiny bell ringing softly in the vast quiet of a humble home. The room is warmed by a small fire, flickering shadows dancing across rough walls, while a midwife's hands, steady and tender, cradle the fragile body wrapped in a coarse cloth. The scent of earth and water mingles with the faint smell of soap and a touch of herbs, anointing for protection, for blessing. Outside, the world waits in silent patience, knowing that even in the smallest of moments, life begins its unending cycle, birth, growth, and inevitable departure. Later, beneath the arch of a simple roof, a young couple stands hand in hand, exchanging vows in the modest glow of a single candle. Faint music drifts from a lute or a flute, a melody brief yet meaningful, echoing the community's quiet witness. A strip of cloth, a pinch of salt, and a loaf of bread, these humble tokens, seal their promise, a shared hope that their union will endure beyond seasons and storms. The gathered neighbors, faces softened by familiarity, smile with a tenderness that whispers of continuity, of lives woven together in the fabric of time. In the corner of a workshop or a family's humble hearth, the work of generations quietly passes from hand to hand. An elder's advice, carved into a worn wooden bench, echoes in your mind, lessons etched by years of toil, of shaping and building, of love and loss. Perhaps a small carved figurine or a simple tool, handed down through seasons, bears the weight of stories and hopes. The air is filled with the scent of wood shavings, of oil and sweat, as the craft endures, a testament to the patience of those who came before. Then comes the ache of departure, a quiet, unadorned room where illness settles like a shadow. The flicker of a candle, a faint prayer murmured, sometimes hurried, sometimes solemn. The unction of oil on a fevered brow, the soft murmur of words of comfort, the weight of silence when the breath falters. In times of pestilence, the rituals may be incomplete, hastily administered, hurried by fear and necessity. You stand there, perhaps a healer or a loved one, caught between hope and helplessness, offering gentle touch and quiet prayers, knowing that even the strongest must eventually surrender to the unyielding tide of life. A bell tolls in the distance, deep and slow, signaling the communal farewell. A procession moves through the streets, humble figures cloaked in simple shrouds, their steps measured and respectful. Ceres' earth receives the departed, some laid to rest in shared graves, others in quiet, unmarked pits, reminders that life's cycle continues, even amid hardship. A prayer is whispered, a name spoken softly at the table, a memory kept alive in the hearts of kin. The scent of Serra Quente lingers, mingling with the coolness of the soil, as the community collectively honors the passage from this world to the next. You find comfort in the quiet truth. Life is a steady rhythm, a dance of beginnings and endings. The world turns like a calendar without notifications, yet filled with the silent music of seasons, spring's promise, summer's abundance, autumn's harvest, winter's rest. Each day a new chance to start again. Each night a reminder of the inevitable farewell. You close your eyes, breathing softly as the shadows lengthen, and feel the gentle weight of this understanding settle within you. The candle's flame wanes slowly, its glow fading into the darkness, but the warmth remains, an ember that lingers in the heart. The city breathes on, alive with stories of birth and loss, of love and farewell. Now it's your turn to rest, to surrender, to the quiet cycle that sustains all things. Between the distant chime of a bell and the whisper of the wind, there's a gentle assurance. Everything that begins will someday find its end, and in that ending, there is a quiet, enduring peace. Close your eyes now. The world continues beyond the window, a soft breath in the night. Rest. The city's heartbeat slows, and so does yours. The gentle darkness envelops you, an invitation to sleep, to renewal, to the eternal dance of life and death. And as you drift into the quiet embrace of dreams, remember, in every ending there is a promise of new beginnings, waiting patiently in the shadows until the dawn.